Margaret, an elderly woman, walks at a calm, steady pace down the sidewalk. She's holding a small grocery bag in her hand, her movements unhurried, as though she has all the time in the world. While the street around her is filled with fast-moving people, Margaret moves with quiet grace, oblivious to the rush of the world around her. There is a serene quality to her walk, as if she's in her own world, unaffected by the hurry and noise surrounding her. Nearby, Officer Harris, a young police officer on his usual patrol, notices Margaret. There's nothing remarkable about her, but for some reason, his attention lingers. His eyes track her slow, deliberate steps. It's as though something about the scene doesn't sit right with him, but he can't put his finger on it. His patrol continues, but he watches Margaret as she calmly proceeds down the street, her presence making the busy street feel suddenly still. Officer Harris approaches Margaret with a sense of authority, stepping into her path and blocking her way. "Excuse me, ma'am," he says firmly. "You can't walk so slowly here. You're blocking the way." Margaret, unbothered, responds with calmness in her voice. "I'm in no hurry, officer." She doesn't speed up or appear disturbed. Instead, she continues walking at her own pace, gently stepping around him. Her nonchalant response irritates Officer Harris. He had expected a more immediate reaction, something that would make him feel in control of the situation. Instead, Margaret's calmness only seems to frustrate him more. "You need to move faster," he insists, raising his voice slightly. "There's no time to walk like this." Margaret, still calm and composed, doesn't respond to his growing impatience, continuing on her path as if his words don't affect her. Frustration begins to build in Officer Harris. He feels his authority slipping away, and the situation, which started as minor, now feels like a challenge to his control. His commands become more insistent, his posture more forceful, but Margaret remains unwavering, continuing her slow walk, unfazed by his demands. In a moment of poor judgment, the officer makes a rash decision. He steps forward quickly, raising his hand and striking Margaret across the face. The sound is sharp and unexpected. The street around them goes silent, the unexpected act of aggression shocking those who are nearby. Margaret stands still, her face slightly turned by the force of the slap. But she doesn't scream. She doesn't fight back. There is no outburst from her. Instead, she stands composed, her quiet resilience in the face of the officer's rash actions leaving an impression that is as powerful as it is unexpected. As Officer Harris walks away, his frustration simmering beneath the surface, the camera lingers on Margaret's still figure. The slap was a moment of aggression that had left her unshaken, her face calm despite the violence of the action. The officer's retreating footsteps fade into the background, and the camera focuses on Margaret's face, her eyes distant, as if contemplating something far beyond the present moment. As the scene shifts, the soft hum of the street noise gives way to a new soundtrack, one of calm, reflective music. The camera pans slowly, and in a transition that feels almost weightless, we're drawn into a flashback. The vivid colors of the street blur into the sepia tones of a past life, and we see Margaret much younger in a different time. We're transported to a time when Margaret was no stranger to the world of high-stakes, danger, and complex operations. Flashing images show a woman in her prime, sharp-eyed and focused, dressed in the unmistakable attire of an FBI agent, a suit, badge proudly displayed, walking confidently down a bustling hallway of the bureau. She is not just another agent. She's a leader, a seasoned professional with a reputation for getting results. We see glimpses of her in action, working undercover in tense environments, making key arrests that disrupt criminal organizations, and leading her team with authority and respect. Margaret is always in control, her decisions calculated and precise, her presence commanding respect from her colleagues and adversaries alike. The montage shows her navigating high-stakes missions with confidence and skill, handling dangerous criminals and sensitive operations with ease. Her face remains steady, resolute in even the most nerve-wracking situations. But there is no glory in the way she works. It's not about accolades or public recognition. She does her job quietly, efficiently, without seeking the spotlight. She's a master of her craft, and her legacy is built on results, not fame. Eventually, after decades of service, we see Margaret sitting at a desk in her office, filing away the final documents of her career. There are no grand farewell parties, no tearful goodbyes. She simply walks away, leaving behind a legacy of quiet strength. Margaret retires from the FBI not because she's tired, but because she has accomplished what she set out to do, and now she wants peace. Her skills, however, remain sharp, even if they are no longer in active use. The flashback ends as smoothly as it began, and the scene shifts back to the present. Margaret is back on the same street corner, standing still after the encounter with Officer Harris. However, the camera now zooms in on her hands as they adjust the strap of her grocery bag, revealing small but telling details that hint at her past. The camera captures a glint of something hidden in her coat pocket, a small badge, almost faded with time but unmistakably an FBI emblem. A second glance reveals an elegant ring on her finger, simple yet significant, engraved with an insignia that any FBI agent would recognize. These subtle clues speak volumes, revealing layers of Margaret's past that she doesn't wear on her sleeve. There is a drawer in her apartment, and the camera gently pulls open the drawer to reveal an old FBI badge resting in a velvet-lined compartment. It's clear that Margaret, despite her quiet life now, carries with her remnants of a past she's chosen to leave behind. The items are tucked away carefully, hidden beneath a calm exterior. Though she no longer seeks attention, the strength and history she carries with her remain as sharp and ready as ever. As the camera lingers on these objects, we begin to understand the depth of Margaret's past. She's not just the elderly woman walking down the street. Beneath the surface, she is a woman who once held immense power, authority, and skill. A woman whose quiet demeanor masks a lifetime of unspoken strength and experience. As Officer Harris walks away, his steps become slower, heavier with each stride. The echo of his earlier actions lingers in his mind. The slap he delivered, the way he had raised his voice in frustration, the unnecessary show of force. There's a knot forming in his stomach, a discomfort that he can't shake off. He tries to focus on his patrol, but his thoughts keep returning to the elderly woman he had just encountered. His gaze drifts back towards Margaret, who is now farther down the street, continuing her slow, unhurried walk. He notices something he hadn't before, a small emblem on the elegant ring she wears. The insignia catches the sunlight, and a sense of familiarity sparks in him. He squints for a moment, trying to place it. The insignia, the shape, the style, it's unmistakable. It's the FBI emblem. The realization hits him slowly, like a slow burn that starts to spread through his chest. The pieces of the puzzle begin to fall into place in his mind. The calmness, the composed nature of Margaret. It wasn't weakness or indifference. It was strength. Her quiet demeanor wasn't a sign of being frail or incapable. It was a mark of someone who had lived through far more than he could imagine. She wasn't just an elderly woman. She was someone who had lived a life of purpose, authority, and respect. The sudden guilt that rises within him is almost overwhelming. Unable to shake the growing realization of his mistake, Officer Harris turns back around and begins walking toward Margaret once more. His heart pounds as he approaches her, the weight of his actions bearing down on him. He hesitates for a moment, unsure of what to say, but then clears his throat and speaks, his voice more humble than before. "Excuse me, ma'am," he begins, his tone soft but sincere. I owe you an apology. My actions earlier were wrong. I didn't understand who you were." He pauses, searching for the right words. "I acted impulsively, and I can see now how disrespectful and unnecessary my behavior was. Please forgive me." Margaret stops and turns to face him. There's no anger in her expression, no signs of hostility, just a calm acceptance. She doesn't rush to speak, taking a quiet moment to assess the officer's sincerity. After a few seconds, She nods gently, accepting his apology, but her eyes, steady and filled with wisdom, tell him everything he needs to know. "I accept your apology," she says in a voice that is both gentle and firm. "But you must understand that respect is not just about what we see on the surface. Everyone has a story, and sometimes the ones we least expect have lived lives far beyond what we imagine." Her words linger in the air, and Officer Harris feels a profound sense of humility wash over him. He had learned something today, a lesson he hadn't anticipated but desperately needed. As Officer Harris walks away from the encounter, a shift has occurred within him. The guilt of his earlier actions is replaced by a newfound respect for Margaret and for everyone he encounters in his day-to-day life. He realizes that he had allowed his assumptions and frustrations to cloud his judgment. Today, he learned that appearances can be deceiving, and the elderly, those who seem to blend into the background, often have more depth and strength than we realize. This encounter will stay with him. It's a reminder that no matter how routine the day may seem, every person has a story, and every person deserves respect. As Officer Harris walks away, there's a subtle change in his demeanor, a greater awareness, a more humble approach to his duties, and a deeper understanding of the true meaning of respect. Margaret's quiet strength and the lessons she taught him will not soon be forgotten. As the scene slowly fades, Margaret continues walking down the street, her movements deliberate and unhurried. The camera lingers on her face, capturing the quiet strength and dignity that she radiates. Though retired, there is no mistaking the power that lies beneath her calm exterior. She may no longer be in the field, but she is still a woman with a history that commands respect. The final shot focuses on her eyes, steady, unflinching, and filled with an inner resolve that speaks volumes without uttering a single word. The bustling street around her seems to fade into the background, as though the world itself pauses to acknowledge her presence. The video concludes with a reflective message to the audience. The voiceover gently reminds viewers, never judge someone based on their appearance, their age, or how they carry themselves. Beneath every face is a story, and every individual carries a history that deserves respect. The video emphasizes that respect and humility are essential virtues. The lesson Margaret imparted is clear, that no matter how ordinary a person may seem, they may have lived extraordinary lives. Whether young or old, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, for no one is defined solely by their present circumstances. We all have a past that shapes who we are, and we must be mindful not to underestimate anyone. As the video fades out, the final image of Margaret walking away, composed, unbothered, and filled with quiet strength, stays with the audience, a reminder that true power lies not in force or aggression, but in grace, respect, and humility.